Dan Spade here, and I'd like to present you with a brief summary of our workshop, Better Outcomes, Better Futures. Before I do, I'd like to say thank you to the wonderful people that attended our workshop. It was an absolute pleasure to work with you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I really appreciate your kind comments and the evaluations afterwards. For those who were unable to attend, this summary may be of use to you, but the real value in the workshop was in the shared experiences of the people who attended, and this was really helpful in terms of our learning. So, what was the workshop about? Well, this workshop explored ways in which we can use strategic planning tools to plan for better outcomes in our lives. It introduced us to a practical planning tool which can assist us in implementing changes in our lives. We had a contract which covered areas such as respect, participation, confidentiality, and timing. We also did a little bit of a getting to know you exercise by filling out a certificate of self-worth, which was used in some of the experiential learning exercises during the workshop. So, first of all, we discussed change and what it was like. As you can see from the diagram, the starting point is at the status quo. It's where we're at now. There's very often a trigger event which will cause us to move on and think about change. We then move into the area of deciding and preparing on a change. If we don't take action at this stage, we immediately revert to the status quo. In taking action, there's also exit points because sometimes we don't go any further. It's a bit like the New Year resolution. It lasts for a day or two, but then we go back to the start again. In moving on to the green area, we maintain the action that we have decided to take. We can exit from that where there is a change in our lives. However, as you can see from the red area, there's also an element of slipping back. It's getting back into old ways, and that can sometimes bring us back to the starting point where we were already. In terms of an example, we looked at something like giving up smoking, where you go through the various stages, and you can see that sometimes making a decision like to quit smoking completely when you're cutting down from 40 a day might be too much. It lasted only one day and you're back to where you started. However, if you change your decision there and decide to cut down rather than quit completely, perhaps you can get some further action in the wheel. In relation to this one, there was considerable progress because it was down to 15 cigarettes a day. This lasted for about a month, but again, some of the things in relation to maintaining the action involved slipping back, and it was events and excuses in this situation, and back to the old ways, although not quite, because there had been some reduction. Plans have consequences. We used an example like getting a haircut. Consequence, I like it. Consequence of that, I'm happy. But it can also have unintended consequences. I got my hair cut, but they made a mess of it and I hate it. So now I'm stuck with it and I can't go out looking like this. Now I feel I've failed and now I'm not happy. Can be unintended consequences. So we've got to think of the consequences by changing the starting point. We often start with the plan and hope it will be successful. We plan it, we do it, then we check it out, but then we may have to act on the consequences pending whether they were positive or negative. At the end point, it's sometimes quite difficult to change the outcomes, so it's important that you plan carefully in advance. What if we change the starting point? If we change our starting point and consider the outcomes, then we have a better chance of success. We did an exercise called upthinking in order to come to our outcomes. So let's say the problem is I'm unfit. In some ways it can be kind of a negative statement, but if I ask myself the question, what do I want instead? Then I will say, I want a flat stomach and to weigh below 200 pounds. That's the initial outcome. If I upthink that another stage and say, what will having that do for me? I will feel better both physically and psychologically. That's a higher outcome. And if I upthink that one again, what will having that do for me? I come to a statement of I will live longer and enjoy my family and life more. It's an example of upthinking where you can come from a problem statement to initial outcomes, higher outcomes, and the impact of those outcomes. It's called outcome-directed thinking. So instead of focusing on the problem, I'm unfit, outcome-directed thinking asks the question, what do you want instead? This question helps people to focus on a positive outcome rather than their problem. Starting with the initial outcome, I want a flat stomach and to weigh below 200 pounds, and then progressively asking the up question, what will that do for me, allows us to discover the higher level outcomes that will motivate us much more. Outcome-directed thinking allows us to move from negative thinking to positive, from I'm unfit to I will live longer and enjoy my family and life more. The positive statement is a much greater motivation for me to make change than the negative statement of I'm unfit. We could use the same methodology in a community development group, where we could move from a problem statement like antisocial behavior, and by upthinking it to having a community where everyone feels valued and respected. Again, much more motivational than the initial problem statement. We completed the upthinking exercise for ourselves, where each participant considered their own problem statement and their own higher outcomes. Then we moved into the area of downthinking. And in this area we looked at the initial outcome. I want to have a flat stomach and weigh below 200 pounds. But I asked myself the question, well, what stops me having that? And what do I want instead? Again, continuing with the question of what stops me and what do I want instead, I can reach a more achievable plan. So the example we used is one of the things that would stop me is I don't like snacks, or I like snacks, I'm sorry. And the second one is that I don't exercise. What do I want instead of the snacks? Well, I want snacks that satisfy, but they're healthy. In terms of not exercising, I want to exercise daily. What stops me doing these? The snacks are pretty much a habit. So, what do I want instead is to make an effort to eat healthy snacks. In terms of exercise, what stops me is a lack of time. What do I want instead? Well, to get up 15 minutes earlier. Again, we did this exercise for ourselves in relation to our own individual change and the initial outcome we had selected. Then we moved on to joined up thinking, which was really by combining our up and down thinking, we can change the focus from our problem to the solution. My problem was I'm unfit. By joined up thinking, I can change that problem statement to a positive solution by saying, by getting up 15 minutes earlier and making an effort to eat healthy snacks, I will live longer and enjoy my family and life more. It's a lot more motivating than the initial statement. Again, people in relation to the problem they had selected for themselves went from their initial problem to a new vision of how to solve it. Here we used a strengths-based approach. And strengths-based practice is a social work practice theory that emphasizes people's self-determination and strengths. It is a philosophy and a way of viewing clients as resourceful and resilient in the face of adversity. In the past, we often viewed clients as the problem, rather than viewing clients as the resource and the solution. This is a client-led approach with a focus on future outcomes and strengths that people bring to a problem or a crisis. When applied beyond the field of social work, strengths-based practice is also referred to as the strengths-based approach. And this is the approach that we want to use in formulating our plan for better outcomes for a better future. One of the first things we had to do was to look at the strengths that we already had, and people were asked to select the top 5 strengths from a list that was given to them. It's also important to look at strengths that other people might see in us. What strengths do your friends say that you would possess? We asked people to retrieve their certificate from earlier on in the workshop to see what their partner had to say, and sometimes a stranger can perceive strengths in you that perhaps you don't see or perhaps you don't wish to acknowledge in yourself. So now we had a list of strengths. We had 5 strengths identified by yourself, 3 strengths that were identified potentially by friends, and 3 or 4 strengths that were identified by the people you were talking to in the workshop today. And the purpose of this is to build up a list of strengths that you feel you might be able to use in order to implement your change. In terms of putting it all together, what we needed to do was focus on the outcome. I will live longer and enjoy my family and life more. Focus on a strengths-based approach, taking some of my strengths, such as something like being creative, being reliable, being competent, and using those strengths in my plan. Then formulating a very simple plan. Start by getting up 15 minutes earlier and make an effort to eat healthy snacks. That's a new starting point for us because it focuses on the outcomes, the strengths, and then we formulate the plan, rather than rushing into doing it. It's also important that we take baby steps. If you try to do everything at once, it can be quite difficult and you can be putting a lot of pressure on yourselves. So for instance, in this plan, the steps were in week 1 to get up early on 3 days, to do 5 minutes exercise, to replace 2 snacks with healthy ones. Increase it a little bit in week 2. Get up early 3 days, do 10 minutes exercise, replace 3 snacks. In week 3, get up early on 4 days, do 10 minutes exercise, replace 4 snacks, and so on. It's important that we also acknowledge our achievements in relation to our plan.